Yeah, I made it, and I'm surprised because when I woke up, my driveway was just a river. My wheels are in a few inches, you know? I don't know, who had that this morning? Anybody, or just me? Oh, just me. No. So it's funny because all week it's been raining, and I'm not used to this still. I'm only 2 years into Florida, you know? And I actually called Tomail-san, who's not here now, but I called him, I said, Tomail-san, what do Floridians do about this? I asked him, is this like where you cancel service, or do I text it? What's going on? He's like, Floridians are kind of used to it. And I remember thinking, yeah, even people didn't even care when Irma came around. A lot of people just stayed, you know? Not the smartest thing necessarily. But, so I'm still not used to it. So I made it down here thinking, wow, the whole state of Florida is going to flood. But it's funny because I had this on my mind all week, probably because it's been raining, but I was thinking about flowing, overflowing. That word just kept coming to me, probably because of the rain, and my backyard is flooded. But actually flowing and overflowing is such a good word. When you see it in the Bible, when you think about flowing, it's usually your love overflows, or you're overflowing with joy, or the land that's flowing with milk and honey. So the word flow is actually a very godly word. It's a very good energy word. When you think about words that are not that way, it's like stuck, or heavy, or stagnant. Those words are a little different energy. But when you think about flowing, oh, let's change mics here. Oh. Hello?
Go back to the other one.
Other one, you sure?
Yes.
Alright, here we go. We got it. I wasn't sure if it was me. But yeah, when you think about flowing, like flowing from this mic to the next mic to that mic, instead of just freezing here like a deer in the headlights, oh no, my mic doesn't work. When you flow, when you keep moving, good things happen. God uses flow. God uses movement. I was hearing a sermon on the radio, and I wanted to sort of give tidbits of it because it was so good. Woo! Something's moving today. This is going to be really good. You can tell now. You can tell. They said, God is a sending God. When God does things, He sends people. Rarely is it, just keep doing what you're doing, stay right there. Right? It's usually sent, go off to a far place. So movement and flow. And so I was thinking about this, and I heard some interesting studies and information this week. One is this thing called AQ. You've heard of IQ and you've heard of EQ, right? IQ is kind of the space in your mind for how intelligent you can be or how you store information in your brain. EQ, who's heard of EQ? EQ is that, I remember thinking this was the new thing. EQ, emotional intelligence. There's all these books on it, best-selling books. And emotional intelligence is how much space you have for varying emotions. How well do you take criticism? How well do you do under different types of situations? So you could be very smart, but you could be a pain in the neck to work with because you're always in a bad mood, or you don't take criticism well, or you're hypersensitive, or et cetera, et cetera. So emotional intelligence became a big topic as of late, as a predictor of success or happiness in your life. But there's a third one now, called AQ. AQ, this is kind of recent that this came out, and it's adaptability quotient. Adaptability. How adaptable are you? How well do you deal with change? And this is becoming, the more they study this, the more they see that this is actually a humongous predictor of happiness and success in your life, is how well do you deal with change? Which is so, I think we all get a really high score today because we drove and we had to take sailboats to get here today. So, how well do you deal with change when the road isn't perfectly dry or smooth? The adaptability quotient is really getting studied now. I think it's so, it's relevant to what we're dealing with in the world today because everything around us is changing a lot. Our habits are almost unrecognizable now. When I was a teenager, people were not staring down at their phones all day, every day. And now it's a different world. We live in a different world. And so things are changing. How well you deal with these changes can actually impact your life quite a lot. And I wanted to share a little bit of changes that I've made. I've done 2 weeks of kickboxing for the first time in my life.
Wow.
Yes. Punching, kicking, sweating, grunting, getting yelled at by this trainer guy. And so I've done it 2 weeks now. I did it 5 days a week. So that's my goal. I'm going to keep that going. Never done this before. Never seriously exercised ever before in my life. So wish me luck. And you know what's so funny is it's a 30-minute workout. It's really hard. And then they don't give you any breaks. And they put you at these little stations. You know, one is a punching bag, one's this other thing, and a weight, and all this other stuff. The first station is a jump rope. And I felt so ridiculous. I'm like, I can't believe I'm paying these guys to yell at me while I jump rope. That's a $5 purchase on Amazon. I could just jump rope in my living room and not have somebody look and yell at me while I do this. Can't I just do this by myself? So the first station is jump roping. And it does feel a little ridiculous. Casey's done it with me. She's doing it too, actually. So it does feel a little ridiculous, but the other day, just a few days ago, at the end of the first week actually, the jump rope station was last in the line. So they rotate how you do it. And the last exercise of the whole thing was the jump rope. And when I got to it, I could barely jump rope. I was so exhausted. And so this simple thing became very hard because I was exhausted after this 30 minutes prior of doing these other exercises. So then I was thinking, oh, that's why the jump rope is here. Because it's actually hard. If you're running out of fuel, if you're running out of gas, and after the succession of other things, the jump rope becomes pretty challenging. And so our topic this month is fuel, right? Last month was authenticity. This month is fuel. How do you fuel up? And you know, while we talk about things like rest and reading, you know, or praying or reflection and taking a step back, sometimes we've gone there, you know, you have to properly nurture. I also want to say that there's no amount of sleeping I could have done before this to make that jump roping easier. There's no amount of resting or sleeping I could have done to make my workout that first week less hellish, right? So you all know the answer. What am I about to say? How do you get more fuel for this exercise? You keep doing it. You keep doing it. You get conditioned. You get conditioned to something. And actually, the flow and the momentum of doing it a lot becomes the fuel. Becomes the fuel, makes it easier and easier and easier. And actually, what you do a lot becomes so easy that it becomes your normal. So what we do on condition, that's why we're doing a prayer condition before this blessing. It's on June 30th, right? Now it's on June 30th. I said prayer. It's a reading condition, sorry. A reading condition. It's not because, after that last time you read on that last day, it's more about the steady flow of conditioning something to become normal and to become default and center in your life, your default settings. You know, technology loves default settings. I think we all know what that means now. Like, when I get in my car and I turn on my phone, does anybody use Waze? I'm a Waze fan. I use Waze. Okay, so when you get in your car at a certain time of the day, it just pops up and says, do you want to go home? Or like, are you going home? And then you just click yes. You don't even have to type in your own address. You don't even have to click the word home. You just hit go. Yes, that's my default setting. And what's so funny is, actually, side note here, it never asked me if I want to come here on Sunday morning, even though I'm always coming here on Sunday morning. And you would think it would catch on. I know they're tracking me. So yeah. Your default setting is what you do over and over again. And this can work both ways. This can work in the positive direction. It can also work in the negative direction. What you're used to doing becomes your normal. Sometimes you could be used to bending over backwards for people. So it just becomes your normal. Sometimes you could be used to complaining. You just do it all the time. Oh, he does that a lot, don't worry. And it just becomes a normal. And actually, so without you noticing it, your barometer is being reset. I thought of this too. This definitely pertains to me and a lot of people I know. Struggling and fighting through your day. You know, how's your day? Oh, just barely hanging in there, man. Just surviving. Struggling becomes your normal, even when nothing's wrong. Just struggling. You know, some people are just like that all day, every day. That became their normal posture and their normal stance and their normal approach to dealing. And something I was thinking about is if you want to fuel up and change something, you're going to have to change the flow. It's not always just a good way to deal with something, just to butt your head against it and fight it. You have to change the flow and make it become easy. Like if I went and worked out one day a month, every single time it would be a fight and a struggle. So you pave the road smooth by doing it a lot. Keishu told me about this study that she saw called the 20-second barrier. Has anybody heard of this? The 20-second barrier. This is a tool that people have figured out, or a little mechanism people have figured out, that if something takes you 20 seconds to get started or do, you're so much less likely to do it. So, if you're thinking, I want to make a fruit smoothie every day for breakfast, but your fruit smoothie machine is like above the fridge, and you have to get a little ladder out to go up to the fridge, grab the smoothie maker, bring it down. That 20 seconds actually deters you from doing things. If you leave the fruit smoothie maker right next to the coffee place, or whatever, right in the middle, you'll do it more often. So there's a 20-second barrier. And the article that we read was saying that actually you can use the 20-second barrier for good and bad. If you want to do something less, put a 20-second barrier there. If you want to do something more in your life, take away the 20-second barrier. So I've used this a lot in my teaching guitar students, because I noticed that I got the most practice done when I left my guitar just laying on the couch. I know my parents didn't like it so much. It's always a guitar laying around. But actually I got a lot of practice done because the instrument was just out. So I tell all my students, if you're okay with it, let your son or your daughter just leave their guitar somewhere they can just grab. It takes the 20-second barrier away and starts that flow. And Casey will tell you, I am not the tidiest person in the world, maybe one of the least tidiest persons in the world, but when I want to do this, I kind of use this so sometimes I leave a book out right next to the coffee pot. Right there on the counter. It just stays open face, and that's my book station. So I know I'm going to hit go on the coffee, pour it, and start reading. And then I know I'll get some reading done. So this is kind of a practical tidbit that kind of embraces this idea of flow. If you want to practice more guitar, practice more something, read more scripture, it's going to be hard to read more scripture when the Bible's on this shelf way over there. Right? So I want to take us a couple notches even further. Just a couple notches further. God is a sending God, and He wants us to flow and move in our life. And the way that we're flowing kind of determines a lot about what direction we're going. So I was reading through different stories of the Bible, and it's just so many, too many to even mention. God sends Joseph to Egypt. God sends Moses to Egypt. Jesus sends his disciples out to go heal people and talk to people. There's always some kind of movement and sending. And actually, I wanted to show you a couple quotes here, a couple of scripture. This is to Moses. God says, "Now go, I will help you speak and will tell you what to say." He's talking about going to Egypt. But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Pretty gutsy. Oh, cool. So he says, "Please send someone else." I have it here, the rest. So, what do you think God did after that? Does anybody know? He argues with Moses. He says, it says right in the next verse, "Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses and said, 'What about your brother Aaron? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you. He will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him.'" All that text. So the first thing God said was just go, in one sentence. Then when Moses gave a little pushback, God went with the whole paragraph. "I'm going to send your brother Aaron. He's good at talking. Maybe you aren't. That's fine. Just go. Get it done." That's a pretty persuasive, persistent person right there, speaking like that. So sometimes we're praying in our lives, we're asking for God to give us an answer or give us a change, and then God says, "Okay, here's the flow. Go here." Or "Here's a new person entering your radar." And then we fight it. So I believe that God's working in all of our lives. And if you believe that, you're going to have to believe that there's certain natural flow that he might be pushing you towards, that you might have to embrace. Going with the flow doesn't mean going the easy way. There might be a flow to push you to a new level or a new direction. Here's another example of God sending someone that it didn't quite play out exactly right. So he's telling Jonah to go to Nineveh. And Jonah doesn't like Nineveh. "Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah rose up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa, found a ship which was going to Tarshish, paid the fare, and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So here's an example of somebody who's going through great lengths to not do what God is telling him to do. He actually, I like how they get really descriptive. He went down to Joppa, he found a ship, then he paid the fare, then he went into the ship, and he went with them to go to Tarshish. He did all that. He worked really hard to not listen to the direction God was trying to give him. And does anybody know how this story finishes? We all know this one. What does God do? He sends a storm. The other sailors are like, "Jonah, this is your fault. We know you're in trouble running from God." So he says, "Okay, go ahead and throw me off." And they did. And then God's probably thinking, "Okay, you're not getting away that easy. I'm going to send a whale and swallow you up and spit you back over to Nineveh like I told you in the first place." So sometimes there's a flow and you're fighting so hard against it, and you ever feel like that? I do. Some things I'm resisting so hard, like I'm going to find any excuse not to do this, and it just, life keeps bringing you back. No, you have to do this. That's happening in my life pretty regularly. I gotta be honest. Especially as an artist type who wants to, just write more music and you'll be fine. It's been kind of a place where a nice year for me to ground and come back to that reality of no, you still have to exist in the other part of your brain too. So if you want to change, you got to create a flow to match it and go with it. And I want to point to the world and society that we live in, because there's things happening right now all the time that's creating a certain kind of flow, and it's not always in the right direction. For instance, our Facebook flow is on 1,000. How many times do you check that every day? You're like waiting for the light to turn red. You're like, oh, Facebook. Like the flow is so quick. It's instant. There's no 20-second barrier. It's a 0-second barrier. It's like right there. It's checking Facebook. And this is actually alarming. I heard on the radio, on the Bible or Christian channel, that actually they're doing studies now that teenagers who spend more than 5 hours a day on social media have like a 70% higher likelihood of suicidal thoughts and depression and all this stuff. This is a flow that's not going in a good direction. You want to think about that. You want to just be careful. What's your daily flow? I figured out that it was really frustrating for me to go to kickboxing unless I did one thing, which is prep everything the night before. I put my shorts, my shoes, my socks, my shirt, my towel, my cheesy little boxing gloves. I put them all in this place, and then I go pretty regularly. But there was a couple times when I missed because things were just all over the place. It was too hard. So if you want to change something, you might want to do the prep work. And actually, this is something I learned from Keishu. She loves doing the prep, the hanging the curtains, to painting the walls, making the chair and the office look right for the work. And I'm learning a lot about this. There is a flow of overstimulation in our society. There's a flow of too much image entering our minds all the time. The flow is not a flow of thoughtfulness and meditation and reflection. There's a flow being created where you can barely hear yourself think because there's so much coming at you all day. Which kind of some of it is our fault, right? We look at computers and tablets and everything. So it's good to try to push back against this and create a flow. I've found that I read better in the mornings. So if I'm trying to create a flow of a little bit more scripture reading, I've found that I'm more in the mood to do that when I wake up. So I just embrace that flow. I don't force, areas that don't come to me naturally. So it's something you might want to play around with. What is your natural flow? And maybe embrace it, work on it, and keep the maintenance there. So as we go on through our weeks, we have a couple weeks left talking about what's going to fuel us up. It's good to think that this repetition that I'm calling flow is actually going to feel sometimes like starting over. It's going to feel sometimes like, oh, I'm failing, or I'm doing this one thing over and over and over again. And I realized we actually can't be afraid of starting over and doing things many times. And I think there's a little bit of a fear or a little bit of a sadness that comes with this idea that I couldn't do it on the first try. I definitely think that we might feel that way, not just on an individual level, but as a movement or as a family. If things didn't work out perfectly that first time, there's a sort of starting over that happens. And I think one thing that I want to just leave you with is that starting over is okay. And actually starting over is part of building your conditioned muscle. Starting over is just fine. So a lot of times, imagine if I went into the kickboxing saying, well, last time I couldn't do the jump rope. You have to have a little faith that you're getting stronger. So God designed you to get stronger and build your muscle up. Your emotional muscle, your faith muscle, your relational muscle, and your physical body, of course. So I just want to say that this week, try to create a new, if you can, try to create a new pattern, something that you do every day, even if it's really small, and see what happens for you. And definitely feel free to join us on our reading condition, because I'm really excited about our blessing on June 30th. And that's another thing we're going to keep doing as a pattern. We're going to keep blessing. We're going to keep teach people the Word, how to have good relationships in their lives. The more we get into this rhythm, the less we're going to feel the impact of each one. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming out.